Well, just in, the chairman and vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr and Mark Warner, are about to hold a news conference during which they are expected to endorse an intelligence report that says Russia tried to interfere in the 2016 U.S. elections. Let's bring in Christopher Swift, adjunct professor of national security studies at Georgetown University and a national security attorney as well. It is pretty rare these days in Washington that you get bipartisan agreement on anything. If the Republicans and the Democrats are going to come to this conclusion, that says something.
That definitely does, John. And what it says is that congressional Republicans and congressional Democrats, just like the defense community, the intelligence community, and the law enforcement community, recognize that the government of the Russian Federation tried to interfere in the 2016 general election. They recognize this as a national security concern rather than a partisan concern. And they're putting the interests and security of the United States first when looking at these issues.
It shouldn't surprise us, I suppose, that the Russians are trying to do this. They've done this in other countries.
They've done it extensively in Eastern Europe, Central Europe. They've done it in Western Europe. There's some indication that the Russians intervened in the United Kingdom during the Brexit vote. There's indications that the Russians intervened in the recent independence referendum in Catalonia, which is part of Spain. That just happened over the weekend. Look, John, for the last several years, the government of the Russian Federation has been trying to undermine public confidence in democratic institutions, not just in the United States, but also with all of our NATO allies. We need to understand that as a form of information warfare and respond to it as a form of information warfare, not look at it through a partisan lens.
All right, so what do the Russians get out of it?
Well, you have to understand the way the Russian Federation views its relationship with the rest of the world. This Russian government thinks that the only time it's winning is when somebody else is losing, and anything they can do to get us fighting amongst ourselves rather than looking at the naughty things that they're doing around the world helps them. It's also important for them from an ideological perspective. The Russian government believes in something called quote-unquote managed democracy, which is not terribly democratic and is quite managed. And they would like that view of the world to have broader currency in the West. So if you don't believe in democratic institutions, if you think that a leader should have strong control over what we do and think on a day-to-day basis, and you're generally suspicious of this messy process we call democracy, then interfering in somebody else's elections is a great way to get people to abandon the ideals that make the United States a strong country, an adaptable country, and a dynamic country.
Well, Hillary Clinton in her new book has suggested that the Russians basically helped cost her the election. I mean, is there any suggestion here that they were coming down on one side or the other in the presidential race?
So for whatever reason, and this is an intelligence assessment, not a partisan assessment, the Russian government decided that they would be better off if the Trump campaign won. I think, like the Trump campaign, the Russian government didn't expect that President Trump would be successful in this election, and were caught by surprise. It's not the only thing that mattered. I mean, certainly the voters had a great deal to say in the last election, and there were lots of other things occurring at local levels in places like Milwaukee and Pennsylvania and elsewhere that contributed to President Trump's victory. So the issue here isn't what caused the victory. The issue here is a foreign government with hostile intent tried to mess with our elections. That's the thing we need to focus on, and that's the thing you'll hear coming out of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee today with clear bipartisan support.
Fake news is part of it. The president talks a lot about fake news, but fake news is part of the Russian effort, apparently.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, just in the last several weeks with some of the difficulties we've been having in the United States with racial tensions and gun violence and any number of other hot-button political issues, one of the things that those of us who monitor what Russia does on the Internet have noticed is how they've latched on to various memes on both the far right and the far left, and sort of used false information and targeted those kinds of vulnerable political groups in an effort to shape how those of us in the center see what's happening in the world. The goal here is really to pit us against ourselves and have us fighting amongst ourselves so we don't notice what they're doing, say, in Syria, or what they may be doing elsewhere in the Middle East, or the things they might be doing to undermine elections in Central and Eastern Europe where we have NATO allies. It's a very insidious approach, and it's quite similar to what the Soviet Union tried to do when I was a child and when you were a child.
Yeah, worth noting when we see some of these things pop up on the internet, and the Russians obviously are masters of that game.
Yeah, so my approach, there's an old Russian phrase, trust but verify. When it comes to things that you're seeing on social media that's from a source that isn't a credible news organization, distrust and then go verify. A lot of the stuff we see online is put there for us to see and may not be true.
Good advice. Christopher Swift, Georgetown University. Thank you.